Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. This time, we're heading to early 20th century India to explore the Home Rule movement.
A movement that many say was absolutely crucial to India's fight for independence.
Right? You are. And our trusty guide for this journey is A Brief History of Modern India. Let me tell you, this book
Is packed with fascinating stuff.
it really is. Okay, so to kick things off, I gotta ask it.
Did you know that there were actually two home rule leagues operating at the same time?
Two. Really? See, this is why I love these deep dives, always learning something new. I have to admit, I always just assumed it was one unified movement.
Yeah, it's a common misconception, but the fact that there were two actually makes things even more interesting, I think. And it speaks to the complexity of the struggle for independence.
Absolutely. So let's rewind a bit, set the scene for our listeners. We're talking early 20th century, right in the middle of World War I. Now, how did a world war halfway across the globe impact India's fight for independence?
You'd think it might have put things on hold, right? But it actually had the opposite effect. It really fueled the fire in a lot of ways. The textbook highlights three main responses among Indians at the time.
Oh, interesting. Okay, lay it on me.
So first you had some, the moderates who felt a strong sense of loyalty to Britain, duty and all that. So they supported the war effort.
Makes sense. Loyalty to the crown and all.
Oh.
Okay, what about the second group?
Well, then you had what were called at the time, extremists. Think folks like the recently released TLAC.
TLAC, of course.
Yeah.
The famous nationalist leader.
Exactly. And they believed that supporting Britain during this huge global conflict, well, they figured it would give them leverage, like a bargaining chip for more self-rule down the line.
Ah, strategic thinking. So they were playing the long game. Okay, that's two groups. What about the third?
All right, so then you had the revolutionaries.
Now we're talking.
Yeah. These folks were not interested in bargaining at all. They wanted complete independence, and they saw the war as a golden opportunity.
So they were ready to seize the moment. Did they have any specific strategies or plans in mind?
Oh, absolutely. Some even went so far as to join groups like the Ghadar Party over in North America or the Berlin Committee. Talk about taking the fight global.
Wow, that's incredible. So you got these three very different responses to the war: loyalty, strategy, and outright revolution. A real mix of ideologies and tactics. It really paints a picture of the diversity within the independence movement.
Right. It wasn't just one monolithic bloc. There were all these different groups, each with their own ideas about how to achieve freedom. But amidst all this, the Home Rule movement emerged as a more, what some might say, sustained and strategic approach.
Okay, so tell me more about this Home Rule movement. What made it so different from the other groups?
Well, they were less about an immediate, violent revolution and more about laying the groundwork for self-governance, but still within the British Commonwealth.
So more of an evolution than a revolution, perhaps.
Yeah.
Trying to work within the system to bring about change.
You got it. And here's where it gets really interesting, right? Because there wasn't just one Home Rule league.
Wait, didn't we just talk about that? Like right off the bat.
We did, yeah. There were actually two.
Two separate leagues pushing for the same thing. That seems, I don't know, maybe a bit counterintuitive. You'd think a unified front would be stronger.
It's true, and there were attempts to present a united front. But despite those efforts, two distinct leagues emerged.
Okay, so give me the details. Who were these two leagues, and what were their differences?
So first up, you had TLAC's Indian Home Rule League, which was established back in April 1916. Their main area of operation was Western and Central India.
Okay, TLAC's league, got it. So who was the other one?
Well, just a few months later, Annie Besant, the prominent theosophist, founded the All India Home Rule League.
Annie Besant, such a fascinating figure. So her league covered the rest of India.
Pretty much, yeah.
So two leagues, same goal, self-rule for India. Were they like rivals? Did they butt heads over strategies or try to outdo each other?
It's funny because you'd expect some friction, wouldn't you? But they were actually pretty smart about it. They set things up in a way that minimized overlap and potential conflict.
So more like a friendly competition, like two branches of the same tree spreading out in different directions.
That's a great analogy. By operating in different regions, they could maximize their reach across India without stepping on each other's toes.
Ah, so it was less about competition and more about collaboration, even if they weren't formally one organization. That's actually pretty strategic. Now, how did they go about, getting people on board with their cause? What was their game plan?
This is where it gets really interesting and where the Home Rule movement kind of sets itself apart. There was a conscious shift in focus from the educated elite to the masses.
Ah, so they understood that real change comes from the ground up, from empowering everyday people.
Exactly. They knew that to really succeed, they needed to engage everyday people, not just intellectuals and politicians.
Makes sense. You need the power of the people behind you to challenge an empire.
Yeah.
But how do you go from debating in elite circles to mobilizing a nation? I mean, practically speaking, how did they do it?
Well, picture this. It's 1916. You're in, say, a bustling Indian marketplace. You might stumble upon a passionate speech by Tilak, grab a pamphlet outlining the Home Rule agenda, or even be captivated by a street play all about self-rule.
Wow, street plays. That's amazing. So they were using all sorts of creative ways to spread their message.
Oh, absolutely. The leagues were everywhere. Public meetings, conferences, libraries stocked with all kinds of nationalist literature. They even held political classes for students.
They were pulling out all the stops, newspapers, pamphlets, posters, even plays and songs. That's incredible. It sounds like they were tapping into the cultural heartbeat of India.
They were. And they were drawing inspiration from all sorts of sources, too. Like, they even looked at the 1917 Russian Revolution and saw the potential for, like, mass mobilization to topple established powers.
Wow. So they were really looking at global events and saying, hey, we can do that too.
Exactly. They saw that change was possible, even against seemingly insurmountable odds.
Such a powerful image. A movement sweeping across India, inspiring people from all walks of life. But I have to ask, how did the British government respond to this growing wave of activism? I mean, I can't imagine they just sat back and watched it all unfold.
You're right, they definitely didn't. Especially down in Madras, the British government came down hard.
In what way did they try to ban the movement?
They resorted to, well, repression. They even went so far as to arrest Annie Besant and her associates.
Wow, they arrested Annie Besant. That must have been a huge blow to the movement.
It was a major escalation. But here's the thing, it actually sparked even more protests.
Really? It's like their attempts to silence dissent only amplified it. A classic case of unintended consequences.
Exactly. It's a recurring theme throughout history. People see injustice, they see those advocating for peaceful change being silenced, and it just strengthens their resolve.
Makes sense. It's like that saying, the harder you squeeze, the more slips through your fingers. So you had this surge of momentum, people defying the British government's attempts to suppress the movement. It sounds like things were really heating up. But eventually the Home Rule movement, well, it started to lose steam, didn't it? What happened? Was it just the British crackdown?
Well, the British response definitely played a part. But there were a number of internal factors, too, that contributed to the movement's decline by 1919.
Okay, so let's unpack those internal factors. What were some of the challenges they faced?
One big one was the lack of truly effective organization across the board. It's one thing to spark enthusiasm, but sustaining a nationwide movement, that takes serious organizational muscle, and that was sometimes lacking.
Right. A movement needs to be more than just a collection of passionate individuals. It needs coordination, strategy, and resources to be truly effective. What else contributed to the decline?
Sadly, communal riots erupted during 1917 and 1918, which obviously fractured the very unity they were striving for.
Yes. The age-old challenge of internal divisions. It's a reminder that unity is often fragile, and external forces can exploit those cracks. So internal disagreements and external pressure, a tough combination for any movement to overcome. Was that the end of the road for the Home Rule movement?
It certainly faced significant challenges, but it's important to remember that its impact went far beyond its relatively short lifespan. And there's one event in particular that really stands out as a testament to its influence, the 1916 Lucknow session of the Indian National Congress.
The Lucknow session. All right, tell me more. What happened there that was so significant?
It was a moment of unity, a coming together that few would have predicted. Imagine this. The extremists, including Tilak, were readmitted to the Congress after a decade-long split.
Wow, a decade-long split. That's a serious rift. What prompted this sudden reconciliation? Was it just a realization that they were stronger together?
It was a combination of things. For one, some of those old controversies had kind of lost their relevance over time.
So they were able to let go of past grievances and focus on the bigger picture?
Exactly. Both the moderates and the extremists realized that their split had only hampered their progress. Plus, both Annie Besant and Tilak themselves really pushed for this reunion. Their efforts to bridge that divide were instrumental.
It's amazing what can happen when people set aside their differences and work together for a common cause. So you have this remarkable reunion within the Congress. But this unity wasn't just confined to the Congress, right? The textbook also mentioned something called the Lucknow Pact. What was that all about?
You're right, the spirit of unity extended beyond the Congress. At the Lucknow session, the Congress and the Muslim League, two groups that, would later have a very complex relationship, well, they signed a historic agreement.
Congress and the Muslim League working together. That's pretty surprising, considering what we know about their later history. What brought them together at this point in time?
It really is remarkable. At this point, the Muslim League's younger, more nationalistic members were increasingly aligning with the Congress's goals. They recognized that a united front was essential in their struggle against British rule.
So they put aside their differences and presented a united front. What exactly did this Lucknow Pact entail? What were they hoping to achieve?
The pact was a significant step towards, well, Hindu-Muslim unity in the nationalist movement. The Congress and the Muslim League agreed to present joint demands to the British government for greater autonomy. They wanted a concrete commitment to granting India self-governance, and they wanted it sooner rather than later.
So they were raising the stakes, making it clear that they were no longer content with the status quo. Did the British take them seriously? Did this show of unity and these bold demands have any impact on British policy?
Well, the response was, kind of a mixed bag. The British government was under considerable pressure. I mean, you had the Home Rule agitation, plus this newfound unity within the Indian nationalist movement. So in August 1917, they issued a declaration known as Montagu's Statement, promising eventual self-government for India.
Wow, a promise of self-government that must have been a major victory for the nationalist movement. It sounds like all their efforts were finally starting to pay off.
It was a significant step, for sure. A recognition that, well, things couldn't stay the same forever. But like I said, it was a mixed bag.
So I'm guessing there were some caveats to this promise. What were the sticking points?
Well, for starters, there was no specific time frame for this self-government. It was all very vague, open-ended.
The classic political maneuver: promise something big, but leave the details fuzzy and the timeline uncertain. What was the other objection?
This second one, and maybe the more crucial one, was that the declaration made it clear that ultimately the British government would decide the pace and the nature of this transition.
Of course. So even though they were promising self-government, they were still holding on to the reins. Indian leaders must have felt like they were being offered freedom on someone else's terms.
Exactly. And understandably, they felt they deserved a say in shaping their own destiny, not have it dictated to them by a foreign power.
Makes perfect sense. So despite this promise of eventual self-government, there was still a lot of work to be done. It wasn't going to be a smooth handover of power.
Not at all. The struggle was far from over. But the Home Rule movement, even though it had kind of faded by this point, well, it left a lasting impact. It planted seeds that would blossom in the years to come.
And those seeds, those ideas, and that spirit of resistance, that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. Stay tuned, because the story of India's journey to independence is far from over.
It's just getting started. Welcome back to our deep dive, everyone. Before the break, we were discussing how the Home Rule movement, even as it declined, really set the stage for Gandhi and his unique approach to the struggle for independence.
Right, we were just getting into Satyagraha, and honestly, it sounds pretty radical, especially for that time. So what did it actually involve? What did it look like in practice?
It was a major shift in thinking, that's for sure. Satyagraha, you see, wasn't just about tactics. It was about, transforming yourself into a force for change.
So it was about more than just outward actions then. It was about inner strength and conviction too, right?
Exactly. Gandhi believed that by, truly embodying truth and nonviolence, you could not only resist injustice, but actually convert your opponent to your cause.
Wow, that's a powerful idea. But it must have been so challenging to put that into practice. How did Gandhi actually teach people to live Satyagraha? What did that look like in their everyday lives?
Gandhi lived a life of simplicity and self-discipline, spinning his own cloth, advocating for a simple rural lifestyle, walking the walk.
So it was about personal transformation as much as political revolution. He saw that connection between those two things.
Absolutely. He believed that real strength came from within, from mastering your desires and ego. But Satyagraha wasn't just about individual practices, it was about collective action, too.
Right, mobilizing people to resist injustice together. So how did Gandhi take this philosophy and turn it into a mass movement?
Well, he was a brilliant strategist, no doubt. He understood the power of symbolism, of choosing actions that would really capture people's imaginations, and at the same time, expose the injustice of the system.
The Salt March is a great example of that, right? Can you remind us about what happened there?
Absolutely. So it's 1930. And Gandhi leads this massive march, thousands of Indians, 240 miles, all the way to the coastal town of Dandi. Their goal, to protest the British salt tax.
The salt tax. Wait, so it wasn't about salt itself, right? It was about what the tax represented.
Precisely. Salt was a basic necessity, but the British had a monopoly on its production. And the tax was deeply unpopular. So by making salt themselves in defiance of British law, these marchers turned a simple act into a powerful symbol of resistance.
It's incredible how something as basic as salt could become such a powerful symbol.
It really is. And the imagery of those peaceful marchers being attacked, beaten by British police for simply making salt, well, it really exposed the brutality of colonial rule to the world.
And must have made people question, what are we doing? Who are the real aggressors here?
Exactly. And by sticking to nonviolence, Gandhi forced the British to confront the immorality of their own actions. Satyagraha shifted the narrative. It painted the British as the aggressors and the Indians as the victims, standing up for their rights.
It's fascinating how Gandhi was able to use nonviolence as a weapon, in a way. Not a weapon that inflicts physical harm, but one that exposes injustice and awakens conscience. So Satyagraha was clearly effective. It mobilized Indians, it won international sympathy, but did it directly lead to Indian independence? Was it the single decisive factor?
It was a crucial ingredient for sure. But as you can imagine, the road to independence was long and complicated. World War II played a big part. It weakened the British Empire significantly. Plus, the tide of nationalism was rising, not just in India, but across the globe.
So it was a combination of factors, internal and external pressures all coming together. But Gandhi's movement, with its unwavering commitment to truth and nonviolence, really seems to have been a turning point.
Absolutely. Satyagraha was a moral force that the British simply couldn't ignore. It chipped away at their legitimacy and empowered the Indian people. And finally, in 1947, after decades of struggle, India achieved independence.
What a moment. The culmination of so much sacrifice and determination. And as we reflect on this journey, it's so important to remember the Home Rule movement. Even though it might seem less prominent than Gandhi's later achievements, it really laid the groundwork for everything that followed.
Without a doubt. The Home Rule League, with its focus on engaging the masses, building those connections across India, and nurturing a new generation of leaders, they really laid the foundation for the independence movement.
It's like they built the launch pad, and Gandhi's movement was the rocket that soared into the sky.
Perfect analogy.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from all of this is that progress isn't always a straight line. It's messy, it's complicated, there are setbacks and breakthroughs. And sometimes a movement that seems to fade away actually plants the seeds for something even more powerful to emerge.
You said it. Sometimes those movements that don't achieve their immediate goals, well, they shift the conversation. They change the rules of the game. They might not win that particular battle, but they make the ultimate victory possible.
So as we move towards wrapping up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about. How did the legacy of the Home Rule movement continue to shape India after independence? We've talked about self-governance, unity, social justice. Do we see echoes of those demands in India today? It's a big question, but I think it's one worth reflecting on.
It is a fascinating question, and a complex one. The journey towards a truly just and equitable society, one that reflects the dreams of all its citizens, is a continuous process. And the lessons of the Home Rule movement, both its successes and its shortcomings, can offer valuable insights as India navigates the challenges of the 21st century.
Absolutely. And perhaps one of the biggest lessons is that change requires constant effort, constant vigilance. It's not a destination, it's a journey.
Well said. The spirit of the Home Rule movement, that yearning for self-determination and a just society, it continues to resonate in India today. It's a reminder that the pursuit of a better future is an ongoing process, one that demands courage, vigilance, and a steadfast commitment to the ideals of justice and equality.
Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through this pivotal chapter in Indian history. We've seen how a movement that seemed to fade away actually planted the seeds for something so much greater. Welcome back to the show, everybody. We've been exploring the Indian Home Rule movement, and before the break, we were getting into the heart of Gandhi's philosophy, Satyagraha.
Right, this idea of truth force.
Exactly. It's such a powerful concept. And we're talking about how it was about more than just outward actions, but about inner transformation as well. Can we dig a little deeper into what that meant for Gandhi and his followers?
It really was a complete shift, wasn't it? Satyagraha, it wasn't about tactics, It was about transforming yourself, becoming the change you want to see almost, cultivating that inner strength.
So it's about aligning your inner world with your actions in the outer world.
Yes. Gandhi, he believed that by really living truth and nonviolence, you could, well, resist injustice, obviously, but also actually win over your opponent.
It's a powerful idea. But it must have been so difficult to put into practice. How did Gandhi actually teach people to live satyagraha? What did that look like day to day?
Well, first and foremost, he led by example. Gandhi, he lived a life of simplicity, discipline, spinning his own cloth, advocating for a simple rural lifestyle.
So it wasn't just empty words. He embodied the principles he was teaching.
Exactly. He truly believed that true strength, it came from within, from mastering yourself, your desires.
So it's about personal transformation as much as political revolution. It's fascinating how he connected those two things. But satyagraha wasn't just about individual practices, right? It was also about collective action, mobilizing people. So how did Gandhi take this philosophy and make it into a mass movement?
He was a master strategist, there's no doubt about it. He really understood the power of symbolism, of choosing actions that would resonate with people, and expose the injustice of the system at the same time.
The Salt March, that's a great example, right?
Yeah.
Such a powerful symbol.
Absolutely. So we're talking 1930. Gandhi leads this massive march, thousands of Indians, 240 miles to this coastal town, Dandi, all to protest the British salt tax.
The salt tax. What was so significant about salt?
Well, salt, it was a basic necessity, right? Everyone needs it. But the British had a monopoly on its production, and this tax, it was deeply unpopular. So by making salt themselves, breaking the law, the marchers turned this everyday act into an act of defiance.
It's incredible how something so simple, so basic, could become such a powerful symbol of resistance.
It really shows the power of symbolism, doesn't it? And those images, peaceful Indians being beaten by British police just for making salt, well, it really exposed the brutality of the system to the whole world.
It must have made people question who the real aggressors were, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And by sticking to nonviolence, Gandhi, he forced the British to confront their own actions. Satyagraha changed the narrative. The British became the aggressors, and the Indians were the ones standing up for their rights.
So satyagraha, it was effective in mobilizing Indians, in winning over international support. But did it ultimately lead to Indian independence? Was it the single deciding factor?
It was a huge part of it, for sure. But the path to independence, it was a complicated one. World War II weakened the British Empire, and there was this global rise of nationalism. But Gandhi's movement, his commitment to satyagraha, it was a force that the British couldn't ignore. It undermined their authority and empowered the Indian people.
And finally, in 1947, after decades of struggle, India achieved independence.
What a moment. It was the culmination of so much sacrifice, so much determination.
And it's so important to remember the Home Rule movement in all of this. It might not be as well known as Gandhi's later work, but it laid the groundwork.
It really did. That focus on bringing in the masses, building those connections across the country, inspiring new leaders, it all built up to the independence movement.
They were pioneers, blazing a trail for Gandhi's vision to take hold.
They were demanding self-rule long before it became reality, challenging the very idea of British rule when so many others thought it was impossible. They might not have achieved all of their goals, but they started a fire that couldn't be put out.
And as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm left with this question. How does the legacy of the Home Rule movement continue to shape India today? We've talked about their vision of self-governance, their focus on unity, their dream of a more just society. Do those ideals still resonate in modern-day India?
That's a great question to end on, I think. The journey towards a truly just and equitable society, it's an ongoing one. It takes constant work, a commitment to dialogue, and the courage to challenge injustice. And I think the echoes of the Home Rule movement, you can hear them in the struggles for social justice, for economic equality, for the full realization of the democratic ideals that India's founders fought so hard for.
It reminds us that history isn't just something in the past. It shapes who we are today. And the Home Rule movement, even though it seems far away in time, its legacy is still alive, inspiring us to create a more just and equitable world.
And that's maybe its most important contribution.
It really is. And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the Indian Home Rule movement. We hope this has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to keep exploring the rich tapestry of history. Because within those